Oh wow. We are back once again in California, back on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, just outside the town of Bridgeport, the place where handy entrepreneurs grew hay and raised livestock to feed all the hungry gold and silver miners and their mules, like this mule right here. It's London! And all of this is going to become very, very relevant because London, my little son, and I are headed off on an old-timey gold mining adventure to the largest unrestored ghost town in the United States. Oh, that's right. We had to pass by it last week on our way to Virginia City. But now I've gone back home to Southern California, picked up the boy, and now we're off on an entertaining and educational adventure. Because today, we're taking the road to Bodie. But before we head up that hour-long road, which includes quite a few miles of gravel, we're checking out this strange, kind of bumpy, lumpy section of creek. It was actually a very important historical location because this isn't just any old gravel and rock pit. This is the former site of Dogtown. Back in the 1850s, all the 49ers started running out of gold on the west side and started moving back eastward. And this was one of the very first places where they were able to pan out the good stuff and create a little mining settlement called Dogtown. It's actually a very common name, Dogtown. Basically just slang for any place that was sort of a shanty town or made up of temporary hovels, or they had a bunch of wild dogs running around. Didn't take long before the folks in Dogtown discovered more rich stuff just over the rise there, along the shores of Mono Lake. And it was from Monoville that a group of prospectors, including one named W.S. Bodie, ventured off into the high, barren hills and made a new rich discovery. Of course, Bodie died in a blizzard going back and forth, but the huge town that bloomed up years later was eventually named for him, so at least he got something out of the deal. All right, and now that we paid our humble respects to Dogtown and looked at the few remaining structures there across the creek, it's time for us to turn this car around and head down to the road for Bodie. The first part of the road is easy, nice and paved and windy and pretty, and there's a ton of sheep to look at. Look at all the sheep. It's a very beautiful, very scenic drive. But hold on to your butts, because it's about to get a lot bumpier. Oh wow, look at that. You can see all the way down to Mono Lake. Alright, it's a little bone shaking on this road, but it's only 3 miles. And I've done it in the Mustang, so this will be no problem. Alright, we made it! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bodie, California. Dude, would you look at the size of this ghost town? The first time I came here, I was about 5 years old, and so this is what's in my head when I think of a ghost town, which means no matter how excited I get about other places, there's always some small part of me that's like, oh, that's it? There are about 110 structures still standing in the town of Bodie, but that is nothing. 70% of the town, at least, burned down in 1932. So at one time, this whole valley was packed with structures and ringed by more than 60 mines, dude. All right, you ready to do some exploring?
I got my map.
Sweet. Wow. This is amazing. It is so awesome to basically stand in a neighborhood between people's houses here in Bodie. You'll notice everything's in awfully rough condition because they keep it in a state of arrested decay. Basically, this didn't become a state historic park till 1962. Obviously, by then, most of Bodie had been abandoned, and so they're basically keeping it in 1962 shape. So they'll replace a few boards as needed, but the idea is to keep it in its ghost town condition, not to restore it. Oh, wow. Look at that. Most of these structures are still filled with the detritus and refuse left behind. You can see how slapdash some of them were. A lot of the roofs were shingled with old kerosene cans and I guess water cans, all kinds of cans, both collecting the warmth of the sun and providing a little extra insulation because it snows quite a bit in Bodie. Wow, look at all the material here. Wish I could buy some of it and build myself a ghost town. Now, obviously, with 60 mines, there was a lot of mineral wealth around Bodie, and the miners here got paid $4 a day, which was a lot of money in the 1870s and 80s. So some of the houses were actually pretty richly furnished. If you look close, you can actually see the remains of lace curtains and fancy patterned wallpaper. These definitely would have been some pretty nice looking houses in their day. Of course, there were the typical miner shacks all up and down these hills as well. But at its peak in 1880, there were 10,000 people living up here. So there were all kinds of businesses, stores, stuff trucked in by mule from San Francisco or overland from the railhead. I've heard it said that at one time, Bodie was the third largest town in the state of California. I'm not sure if that's true, don't quote me on it, but I tend to believe it. Oh, look at this, you can see new wood shingles up there on this old house. So, see, the arrested decay thing. They'll replace the roofs just to keep them standing. But a quick look inside will show you it's hardly restored to mint condition. Oh my gosh. What is this, Miss Havisham's house? Oh, look at this. It's Miss Havisham's restroom. Ah, I wonder if Pip ever used this bad boy. All right, the houses are cool, the houses are exciting. But maybe first, before we look at all the houses, we should make our way into downtown. Oh, wow. Look at this place. Dude, it's awesome. Look at the beautiful 1880 Methodist church. I believe this was the first church built in Bodie. There were thousands of people and dozens of saloons here for years before they finally got a church. And when they did finally build this place, apparently it was not very well attended, which led the Reverend F.M. Warrington to say that this town was a sea of sin lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. Oh, whoa. The whole building just creaked from the wind out here. They used to have the 10 Commandments right there in the center. But I guess the folks in Bodie were tired of looking at them. Oh yeah, Bodie was not really known for its church attendance. In fact, Bodie probably had the worst reputation for sin and murder than any other town in the wide, wild west. The quote-unquote bad man from Bodie became a cliche, even as far away as the New York newspapers. There were saloons everywhere, gambling houses, even opium dens. A lot of opium dens, in fact, so many that they had to outlaw it and get the sheriff to get all crazy and give drug users a $500 fee and opium den operators a $1,000 fine. And remember, this is back in the day when $4 a day was a high wage. There were so many shootings and knife fights and murders and fist fights that the comparatively sophisticated town of San Francisco and the other mining camps back in California on the western side of the mountains just ate up the stories of the bad men from Bodie and all the murders, and so it filled the newspapers. And like I said, this town had a horrible reputation to the point that it led to a story where a little girl back in San Francisco or somewhere like that, finding out that her parents were going to move them to Bodie, was saying her nightly prayers and said, "Goodbye, God, we're going to Bodie." Of course, the newspapers here in Bodie spun that around and said what she was really trying to say is, "Goodbye, God, we're going to Bodie." Wow, look at this old buggy in here inside this barn. You can see all the tools left behind as well. Back over there in that cabinet, I can see a couple of drills, some saws. Oh, there's a whole toolbox back there full of stuff. And look at this chair falling apart. Just incredible what was left behind here. All right, we finally made it down to Main Street. And it looks like we're not the only ones. Looks like there's quite a few residents of the town of Bodie after all. Just of a more bovine nature than the days of yore. Ah, look at this, London. This was the Deschambault Hotel. The post office moved into this building in 1879 and wasn't shut down until 1942. Apparently before it was a hotel, upstairs was Grandma's rooming house. Well, Grandma had an awfully nice looking place. Wow. Look at all that. See, I'm not sure the post office was in here all the way until 1942, just that there was no longer any postal service to Bodie after that date. But at least back in 1879, you would have had to have everyone in town coming here to these little boxes to get their mail, which means a lot of old-timey feet passed through that door. In 1879 and 1880, the estimated population was 10,000 people. By 1910, though, that number was only 698 people, and that's with some of the mines still going. So by then, I'm guessing they didn't have a lot of meetings up at the International Order of Oddfellows Hall. What they did have by then, however, was electricity. Hydroelectric electricity, as a matter of fact, piped in from miles and miles away. You'll see little electrical fixtures all over town. This is part of why the town of Bodie, or what's left of it, survived for so long because it lasted through the, high Gilded Age into the Edwardian era. They even had their own gymnasium. They had Edison's electric lights and telegraphs, automobiles, eventually radio, and most importantly, even back in the early days, running water piped in from a great distance and then put into tanks on top of the hill so gravity would make pressure, which means they had fire hydrants. Unfortunately, by the 1930s, the town was so depopulated and started to fall into such disrepair that most of the lines were clogged. So when, as the story goes, a 3-year-old child started the Great Fire of 1932 that burned down 70% of the town, the lines were clogged up just enough that it took so long to unclog them. And by the time they did, the inferno was too crazy, and the massive ghost city of Bodie became the ghost town. Here we have the 1878 Miners Union Hall. The Miners Union are the ones that made sure those guys got $4 a day. And because most people in the town were working as miners or working for the mines in some capacity, this building was really the center of town life. They held dances here, Christmas celebrations, speeches, guests of honor hosted there. It's still the center of town life in a way because now that is the museum at Bodie. Unfortunately, with the rules of social distancing in effect, you could only go inside the very front to buy a couple of souvenirs or pay the fees. So no museum for us today. Dude, look at this. This building here is known as the Swayze Hotel because in 1894 it was bought by a guy named Horace Swayze. Horace is a heck of a name. I should have named you Horace London.
I would have never forgiven you.
Over the years, I believe this housed a dry goods store and obviously the hotel and probably many uses. You can see the window is gone now, the whole building's leaning, but it has a serious claim on my affections here because according to theme park historians and the Knotts family, this building right here was the original inspiration for the Goldie's Place building at Knott's Berry Farm. Goldie's Place is a little bit different, but look at that. You got the room up there where the leg could be sticking out the window. There would have been a staircase here, and then you can picture Sad-Eyed Joe just being right there. Not a bad connection, huh? Not a bad connection. Wow, this building is a survivor. Probably survived the fire because it's sitting right in front of one of the fire hydrants. Look at this thing. 1879 right on there. When I think 1879 in the Old West, I do not think fire hydrants, but there's one right in front of us. Back in the day, Main Street would have been a lot wider, as you can kind of see. And that's because there were insane amounts of traffic on these streets. Remember, by 1879, there were more than 60 mines in the area, and most of those, and the mills that crushed their ore, relied on steam-powered equipment, which meant that in this treeless region, hundreds of tons of wood had to be brought into Bodie. In the surrounding area and the mountains and the Sierras, there were more than 100 timber operations, including some gigantic mills just to supply the mines and the mills here at Bodie. Bodie's 9 stamp mills needed over 300 cords of wood per day. Just one cord of wood is 8 feet, so about this length, by 4 feet by about chest high. So one cord of wood is about this high and this far just to walk around. 300 of those per day. And in addition to all that wood, remember that every other item needed to be hauled into Bodie as well. If my memory is not faulty, I believe the closest town with a rail connection was Hawthorne, Nevada, at least 30-40 miles over the mountains, which means even from there, Bodie had to have all her food and supplies hauled in by wagon, mule team, ox cart, well, and eventually by truck. So back in its heyday, not only would you have seen infinitely more buildings, but you just would have seen hundreds of wagons going up and down these roads every week. And they say there was at least a donkey or mule for every man. So picture at least 10,000 animals out here, mostly to work the mines, but also to move around all those vehicles. London pointed something out to me in the little guidebook that they give you here for $3, which is that I keep talking about how 70% of the town burned down in 1932. That was 70% of what's left. As London justifiably pointed out to me, back in 1879, 1880, there were significantly more buildings than there were even in the 1930s.
So all these buildings here were only 5% of the peak.
So 110 structures times 20.
So well over 2,000 buildings.
Yeah, dude, that That is nuts. Of course, Bodie was here for so long that technology continuously changed. Like I said, eventually they got electric power, although they'd have to revert to steam in the winter. They went from ore crushing stamp mills and quicksilver to the cyanide process out here to work the tailings. So there used to be a huge cyanide mill in Bodie that burned down.
That burned down in the 50s because someone was smoking inside.
One of the many reasons why Bodie has a very strong no smoky rule. Actually, there were just so many weird waves of population in Bodie before its eventual death that when a different electric company came in and bought their power supply, for a while, I think 1923 to 1929, the power was even turned off here. But yeah, just think about living in this very harsh, very dry, unforgiving landscape. Bodie has insane winds and even crazier, even more insane snows. The record was 28 feet, but one of the park rangers was telling us that 2 winters ago, they had a 10-foot base, and then what do you say, 5 to 8 foot drifts on top of that. So he was driving a snowcat at the roof line of some of these buildings out here. So not only was it hard to get your supplies up here any time of the year, they all had to be sort of trucked in by a wagon or animal power. But in the winter, you couldn't get any supplies at all, making it even more important for the stores here to be very well stocked. After all, like I said, 10,000 people up here. That's pretty much a major city for the time. You've got to have your conveniences at the ready. A fine example of one of those stores is the Boone Store and Warehouse. Built in 1879 and owned by Harvey Boone, a distant cousin of Daniel Boone. It was one of dozens of stores in the town of Bodie, but unlike some of the rest, this one survived. And with a lot of products still on the shelf, as it were. Oh my gosh, would you look at the size of that selection?
This is 1800 Walmart.
Dude, the amount of stuff in here is insane. I don't know if they gathered this from other areas of the town or some of it might be replicas. I mean, it might all have just been here, but it's just hard to wrap my brain around this many products, about this much stock being left here all the way until 1962. I mean, if you were to buy up all this stuff at an antique store, you would pay a pretty penny. Look at that, there's actually even a Boone and Wright sign. It's mind-blowing to think of how much of Bodie is missing these days, but it's even more mind-blowing seeing what's survived. Look at this right-hand section of the building clearly served as the gas station for the latter half of Bodie's story. You can see all the old oil pumps in there. They would pump it out into those glass bottles. You can see the old outdoor signs for the station. That's just incredible. Dude, there's so much to see in Bodie. We've used up half of our time here just going over the basics. Dude, some of the buildings here are so skinny. You never realize just how deep they can go, especially when they're on the corner there, so they can face out to 2 different streets. We're cruising up Green Street now. Wow, they left a lot of stuff behind us, some of these buildings. That was an old 1910 hydroelectric substation. Was a pretty powerful building in its day, huh, London? Powerful, that's why it withstood the test of time. Oh, and look at this, something you haven't seen for a while, buddy. A schoolhouse. Look at that thing. Even with a population of 10,000 inhabitants in Bodie, the maximum enrollment at the school was something like 615, something like that. And that's because even here with running water and fire hydrants and all the conveniences of the Boone Store, it was still mostly gruff and grim men working the mines. And women and children were a rarity out here. The school didn't close down till 1942. Look at that. You see the wooden flagpole on top? That's awesome. Wow. Dude. It's funny, they still got the old shades there. Wow. London. Do you realize what this is? This is old school. Old school. Yeah, sure, you can't get more old school than that. Not in Bodie anyway, because the older school burned down, remember? So you can't get more old school. It must be fun having a dad like me, huh, buddy? By the way, I just realized I should point this out. If you see London looking a little grim, it's because the kid just got a mouthful of metal, so he's a little sore, he's adjusting a little. The lips are a little scrapey right now. That's part of why we're out here spending some time trying to distract the poor guy from sitting around on the couch at home and just being like, oh. All right, continuing up Green Street, you'll see a whole bunch more houses. This little house was the home of the secretary of the miners union. And most of these other little frame houses look awfully nice, even compared to some of the ones down there. So I'm guessing this was more of an executive neighborhood, a little more exclusive, huh? This was a doctor's house, a fancy female-run boarding house, whole bunch of little miners' houses. Some much nicer than others. Look at this one. They were growing hops here on the fence. Still growing today.
For rent. Fully furnished fixer-upper. Some ghosts included.
This was the Conway house, named after Tim Conway Jr. How about that? Look at that canvas on the outside. They needed all the extra insulation they can get. And speaking of which, look at this. You've got an outhouse attached to the back of the building. That's something pretty gross that you would almost never see. But the fact is, there's not even 1 month out of the year they don't get freezing temperatures up here. And when there's 10 feet of snow on the ground, you don't want to walk 20, 30 feet to the outhouse. You gotta go when you gotta go, man. Now, according to the $3 guidebook, one of the houses up here on the hill was the home of one of the last residents of Bodie, Dogface George. Unfortunately, they're not very specific about which house that is, but I hope it was this one, because it would mean that old Dogface had his very own garage with his own wagon. Oh, good old Dogface. Which house was yours? You'll notice there are not a lot of overhangs to the roofs here. That's because the snow gets so heavy it would just snap them off. But they do have, on a lot of these little houses actually, the little weather doors. You come in, the little snow door, disrobe, and then make your way inside the house. Dude, these are all so awesome. I wish we were allowed to go inside.
Probably a little dangerous.
I remember the days before plumbing. We used to wash our rumps in a wash tub just like this. You ever washed your rump in a wash tub? Huh? Have you? Let me tell you something. It's a fine treat for your seat.
Oh, well, this looks like the fork to me. It said out the fork, so that was probably Dogface George's house. Old Dogface was washing his rump in a wash basin. Dude, look at these power poles or telephone wires. They go all the way up the hill, all the way to that pile of mine tailings up here. Speaking of which, look at them. Wow. All the old hoisting works, mostly burned down. There's one mill, I think, down there. We'll go check that out in a little bit. 8,500 feet up here. The air's a little thin. Shortness of breath? Yes, we do have that, but not from a disease because we're up on the hill. Eventually we're supposed to meet up with my brother, and then tomorrow we're supposed to go up some of these dirt roads back there in various directions to other mining towns. This place was pretty much surrounded. You had the town of Masonic, I believe, off this way. That was a later town. And then before Bodie's big boom, there was the town of Aurora in Nevada, which was over yonder, not too far away. As a matter of fact, Mark Twain tried his hand at mining and started writing letters to the newspapers before he became a full-fledged newspaperman and writer in the town of Aurora. I've always wanted to go there, so hopefully we'll make it. But even though he passed through this area on his way down to Mono Lake beyond the hills there, and mentioned Monoville down there, he would have never seen Bodie because Bodie hadn't really been constructed until the 1870s. Anyway, that'll be pretty cool. Probably won't bring cameras along, I don't think. It's more of a research trip for a future, more extended look at some of the archaeology out here. Look at the pits from all these houses. Both sides of both these little streets would have had houses all the way up. These would have been more of your classic miners' shanties over there. You can see some pretty little places. For one thing, just like any other town, the outskirts were a lot cheaper than the center. And even though I can tell you for a scientific fact, it's a pain in the butt to go up and down this hill, at least with most of the mines up here, you'd be close to your job. Yeah, look at that. These look like big coffee cans flattened out and used as siding and roofing to protect the house, give it an extra layer of insulation, and of course, in the summer, hopefully collect a little bit of that sunshine and maybe keep it warm. And yes, I meant summer. Even in July and August up here at night, it gets really cold. Wow, look at this bottle. I wonder what it was for. See, Moore, Hunt & Co. Sole Agents. This is like an archaeologist's dream. Gonna put that right back in situ where I found it. Look, along with the coffee can siding, you can see here they used some wood from a shipping crate that apparently had something written on it addressed to Bodie for one of the doors here. Look at this. These cans hung up. What is that, the alarm? Couldn't have smelled too good in the gully between the rows of houses with all the miners having to use the facilities connected to the back of their houses. Most of these buildings up here I can see are beyond the forbidden zone fence. It's supposed to keep the cows out. As you can see, it doesn't always work too well. And as you can see, it's tucked right up against most of the mines, and there's probably still a lot of open shafts over there. So I suppose for our own safety, we're gonna have to head back down. Maybe we'll get close to that mill though. I've noticed that most of the visitors today have blasted through in 15 minutes or so. But I really like to take the time to see these places like this where you could see the hillside was dug out to create a flat area for a building, or to see the sunken pits from where other buildings used to be, or where they might have had cellars to put their food in, cold storage, you know. Whoa, and you could see whatever this small building was, it had a water pipe coming in. I love seeing the old pieces of jars or barrel staves or the old outhouses. Much to London's annoyance, I'm sure, because he is, after all, a teenager. I just like to walk around and find, you know, what was it really like back then? Get a real sense of walking through the neighborhoods. So in my imagination, each pit becomes a little miner's house, and each outhouse is given off for stank. Whoa, close the door, close the door! Ah, yes, we're getting closer to the mill here. This was called the Standard Mill, and this big house behind me was used for the mine superintendent and his family. And this particular mine superintendent, who lent his name to the house, was none other than Theodore Hoover, the brother of President Herbert Hoover. So to this very day, it's known as the Hoover House. Actually, it looks pretty darn nice, pretty big for these parts. Oh yeah, look at this. The assay office is the second building right there. Here's the smelter. I think this one is the blacksmith. The big stamp mill is in the back. They do give guided, ranger-led tours of these places at times. Unfortunately, during the pandemic is not one of those times. Look at this. You've got the old fire hydrant here. So clearly the old plumbing line. And then right behind you, London, the modern fire hose sheds. Probably built right along the same pipelines. Wow, dude, look at that. That is impressive. Like I said, I think there were 9 large stamp mills in Bodie. All had to be powered by steam, burning wood. The water for the steam had to be supplied by pipeline from miles and miles away. And if you've ever heard a stamp, I think there's one by the parking lot, so I can show you what I mean by stamp. Big giant thing that crushes and pounds the rock into wet, slurry sludge powder. They are loud. It says I can hear cows and people whispering and talking from across this entire valley, all the way from here. Forget the men, forget the dynamiting, forget all the talking and the whiskey and the saloons and the wagons. Just the sound of those chong, 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 chong. Stamp mills would have made Bodie a very loud, very busy sounding place. Look at this wire running down to this old safe. That's weird. I wonder what this is from. You got all kinds of equipment in here. Look at this hoisting bucket. That ore bucket is taller than I am. And clearly this is part of a hoisting engine, you know, to haul men up and down those vertical shafts. Well, and hopefully haul up some gold too, right? Oh, and short round, look at this. Some ore carts. I know, you want to head back to the car for a little break, maybe get a little grub, but look, quick. Oh no, another ore cart. We've got to do the photo shoot again.
No.
Oh, he won't do the photo shoot with me. This is bull crap. Wow, look at the view of Bodie from down here. Just gonna give you guys the quick look around. It's weird because from some angles, this town looks awful small. You're like, not too many buildings. And from other spots like this, you can really tell just how huge it was. And something about being here in person is you can notice all the little cutouts to the hills and all the little lumps and mounds. It gives you a better sense that this entire valley was crammed with buildings. For example, in person, it's just really visible, the shape here, where something used to sit. Oh man, I know this is gonna sound weird, but I've always wanted to own an authentic 19th century ore cart. They're so expensive though. Whoa, look at the old well here. You could crank up some water and fill your wash tub. It's a treat for your seat to get out of the heat. They were so hygienic here in Bodie. We've been here now for about 4 hours, which is longer than anybody else has survived that we saw this morning. And just cruising through in the briefest of ways and not even getting to spend a long time looking. Because, you know, mainly I'm here because it's the boy's first time and I want to give him a good sense of, you know, the major sites. But without even going full Justin on it like I normally do and wandering down every nook and cranny and looking at every artifact. It's been 4 hours and I could spend probably, dude, it would take you 2 or 3 days if you're a real hardcore enthusiast to really see and absorb everything. Look through every window, try and peek at every detail, see all the artifacts, make bananas in every outhouse. But I will give you some tips. You can let kids run all over here, but just make sure you have really good shoes or boots. There's glass, there's nails, there's wire. And we're up at 8,500 square feet, 8,400 down at the foot of Main Street from what I'm told. It is very dry up here. You need to bring a lot of fluids. Don't do what I just did, don't leave them in the car. It's only 60 degrees, but the sun is intense. You need a lot of stuff to keep the sun off, and then you get hot, you get dry, you get dehydrated. It is very easy to get heat stroke. Speaking of which, funny story, the first time I came here, I was 5 or 6, my brother was 3 or 4, and we ran around here all day, me making memories that would instill in me a love of ghost towns for the rest of my life, and Seth giving himself heat stroke. And once he got to the parking lot, he created his most lasting and only memory of Bodie, throwing up over and over and over again. So don't be a Seth. Make sure to drink plenty of water. And look who just showed up.
I'm out of water.
I was just telling the story of you throwing up over and over and over again. Your only memory of Bodie.
Yeah, I'm already a little crazy.
And now you're back to make new memories. All right, we're now into overtime. This is a much longer episode than you'd normally have. But to be fair, this is a much more epic place than you would normally see. This is mostly a research trip like I had kind of mentioned before, and so this was a good refresher for me to get my head back into Bodie, a good first visit for London, and a good first revisit for Seth over there. Hopefully this time he'll remember some of the water. So I'm gonna drag him back down into town, show him all the stuff I just showed you, and then we'll meet up with you guys down here and some of the stuff we haven't seen yet in just a little while.
Ooh, time passing like a river on your mind. Ooh, time is passing. Where does it all go? Eventually, we all die.
All right, Seth has now perused the town with me. It's hard to get a 13-year-old kid, although 13 is easier than 5, let me tell you. It's hard to get a 13-year-old kid to be excited about lumps of dirt where buildings used to be. Like here, there's this caved in area. You see they had gas or electricity or water, something coming up that pipe. Ooh, and look at this. I love the recycled materials thing. Look it. Do you know what this is? These are obviously coffee cans or water cans, some kind of cans, but this is pressed tin. These patterns were usually used as ceiling tiles or floor tiles around an old potbelly stove. Decorative ceilings usually. So clearly, as some parts of town were being abandoned, people were scavenging like Rey from The Force Awakens and grabbing parts of the old buildings to patch up their little houses. Now the next trip I do up to Bodie, there are so many stories of the people who lived in some of these houses, and then they're over in the graveyard, and just some fascinating stories of what happened to some of these people and the lives they lived. So hopefully we'll be able to delve more into that. And then I plan on finding out just how many outhouses are left out here. Wait, what's in there? Say it again.
Pineapple juice.
Pineapple juice?
Del Monte pineapple juice.
Dude, I wish I could get that stove. Ooh, there's a baby buggy in there. I think it's a baby sled. They did have snow up here. I don't see any wheels, but maybe they recycled the wheels. Put them on the bus. Anyway, what I was trying to say was the next trip will delve more deeply into some of the stories and lives of people in Bodie, and much less of a just giant overview. All right, starting to see some pits cut down into rock, which means we must be pretty close to the bank. See, from Main Street, they just dug into the sides of the hill to create their building, sometimes using the back of the hill as the first floor, or in England, the ground floor, walls. You basically have a built-in cellar. Once you do that, stack up some stone, get some mortar. See, this is so strange. We're pretty sure, they're not labeled very well, but we're pretty sure this is the old bank location, because there's the bank and the Moyle warehouse right next to each other. And even though there's a vault in this one, the map shows this being the bank and that being the warehouse. Weird. But look at this. Either way, whether this was bank or warehouse, check this out. There's a piece of the old ceiling, because I've seen a bunch more pieces. Look at that. So the timbers are all gone. The brick is all scavenged and picked over, but you know what the ceiling looked like.
I'd like to make a withdrawal from my safety deposit box, please.
Sorry, sir, it burned. Wait, no. There's another ruin there. So this must be the bank. That is unlabeled on the map. And that must be the Moyle warehouse where all the Moyles kept their little sharp knives for doing, you know what they did. Okay, now I know that one of the banks in Bodie burned in that 1932 fire, the huge fire, and that they were all hoping against hope, running water on just the safe inside of one of the major buildings. I thought it was the bank. Hoping against hope that it was fireproof enough to protect all the valuable documents and stuff left in the town. And when they opened it back up, bam, it was all safe. Waterproof and fireproof. All the documents had survived, all the deeds. I'm not sure it was that safe or this bank because there could have been more than one bank in Bodie, obviously. But I believe this is the one. Look, the whole inside of the vault, not just the safe, seems to have made it through the fire okay, even though all the brick is down, the roof is down. I think there's been earthquakes up here, right? Around Mono Lake, I think.
Gotta be.
So I imagine earthquakes probably tumbled down a lot of the stone and brick structures that the fire didn't get to. Look at the weird mix of stone and brick and stone. Just weird building materials. Look at, here's the Moyle warehouse. No more sharp knives. They did leave the kitchen sink though. Sterilization, very important for Moyles. It is Moyle warehouse, right? Because otherwise the joke isn't funny if it's like Mowgli.
It's Moyle.
See, there's a big old foundation right there. That's the stuff that fascinates me. Anyway, I know we're way over time, so I gotta hurry up and get to the end of this. All right, this lovely building, as you can see from the windows down that hallway, was the Bodie Jail. How about them apples? Oh, and look what we have in the sheriff's little office in the front of the jail. We got a wash tub. It's a treat for your seat.
There's the pee bucket right there.
Pee bucket? Ooh. Oh, smells like fresh cows down here from all the... Look at all these wash buckets. See, what was who doing with all these wash tubs down at the old abandoned jail? Did it turn in to a laundry? Did they have prisoners washing laundry? Did somebody just dump a bunch of buckets in there one day because they needed somewhere to keep them? Ooh, yeah, that smells old inside. See, this looks like it was replaced because they have the whole arrested decay thing, so they won't restore full buildings. But over time, like if a wall starts to fall out, they will mill exact sizes of the wood. They do have a lumber mill thing shop here, and they'll cut all the stuff. But when I smell the inside, even if some of this has been replaced, there's no way that has. Even down here, you can see the pits left over from people's basements. These wouldn't have been mine shafts. Mine shafts are usually 10 by 10. By the Bodie time period, square set timbering and mining had become pretty standardized. By the way, what killed Bodie was World War II. All non-essential mines were shut down for the war effort. And then, even afterwards, the mining unions would not change the pay rate. So, even if the mines were producing less, you could not afford to pay miners less than the standard rate that a very successful mine would pay. And so, Bodie could not compete with other more profitable mining ventures and shut down. But theoretically, there's still gold in them there hills. So Seth just told me that this was apparently the liquor warehouse. I must have seen this before, but I don't really remember. Not only was it made out of brick, very sturdy, well, not too sturdy, look, it's crumbling down, but they have a safe door on it, like a full-on crazy locked door, so you could meet the receptionist in here and then you're not getting the booze. All right, well, I could stay here till the cows come home, or go home, as it turns out, because I find stuff like this endlessly fascinating. But all episodes, even the fascinating ones, have to end sometime. Plus, it's getting late and the park is gonna close in about another 20-30 minutes. Probably gonna take us that long just to get out of here. So I think it's safe to say we've done our duty. I do have a friend that has a special message for you guys over yonder. I think Julio met up with him earlier. That's why he hasn't been in the town with us. So stay tuned after the credits, as it were. And in the meantime, make sure to go check out all the links and check out our online store for sick merch, all that stuff. And then you'll have done your duty and you can go home and sleep well.
just missed Julio. I told him about my secret tunnel to the riches, and he's down there right now, looking for gold. I suppose you came up here looking for another story. Let's head up past me outhouse. Hopefully this time you came to ask about something a little more interesting than the red light district that you asked about last time. I remember. All right, me outhouse is Sue outhouse. Now that you're done with that, come to my house. Woo! More than 8,500 feet of the good Lord's elevation up here. Makes it powerful and difficult to breathe. Oh, let me sit down and rest my bones a spell. Oh, so you come back to the town of Bodie. Yes, I knew W.S. Bodie. His name was William Stanford. A lot of people argue about that. Old Willie Stanley Bodie and I was out here prospecting in 1859. We come all the way from Virginia City, you know, over there at Gold Hill, where we discovered some gold and some beryllium in the mountain tops. There was this strange blue substance. Some people says it was what the Blue Man Group was made out of. Come here, come closer. And we didn't know what it was. It was kind of a sludgy material. However, when I came up here to the mountains in Bodie, and good old W.S. Stanley and I were up here digging around, feeling weird, I told him, I said, Bodie, you's one grody so-and-so. He's always talking about opium dens and red light districts and gambling and saloons and spittoons. He's always chawing a big gunk of tobacco. And when you ain't got no tobacco, you grab a bit of this here plant. I forgets the name of it exactly now. And you chaws it. You chaws it real good. And anyway, Bodie was doing that, and I says, Bodie, you's grody. And then old W.S., he says to me, Erasmus, I believe I've discovered gold here, and I shall name the town Grody, because the weather is awful disgusting. Says I to Bodie, Bodie, that is one heck of an idea. I think it's an ideal idea. So I grabbed my bubble pipe, packed up my mule, and I comes up here from Monoville. Bodie, he gets to dying in the snowstorm, but the rest of us builds a town. I told everyone, Bodie called it Grody. Bodie, say it with me, Bodie called it Grody. But they decided to name the town after him and end up spelling it incorrectly, because Bodie was an E-Y, and this is an I-E. Well, I was living up a shack on Onion Hill over there, next to Horse-Faced George. You remember Horse-Faced George, of course. Yes, you do, you do. And old Horsey-Faced George and I, well, I forget where I was going with that, except we were eating the onions. Oh, that's correct. Y'all have a nice time now. Don't beware the opium dens, and go get yourself some gold. You just head on out. Goodbye.
It echoes.
Stop.